to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. The next stage basically is just to show you how to weld the ends onto the cable. Now, cable comes in lots of forms. You can get this from a number of places. If you haven't got steel cable, obviously nylon will do, or just go to B&Q or another hardware store and get yourself some sort of reasonably sort of big nylon rope. And that'll do sort of just as well. Obviously, if you're using stainless steel, that's going to last a lot longer. But the one thing that I would say is I'd advise you use something like this because it's nice and smooth, and when the net goes on there, it'll it won't rub the net and wear through it. Whereas if you put nylon against nylon and rub the two together, what you can get is sort of bobbling occurring on there, and that may start to eat into your net. So. You should be okay, but obviously it's mindful, and obviously steel is stronger, and you can pull it tauter, so it'll keep its shape a lot better as well. So what I'll show you how to do now is basically weld the either the thread or the bolt onto the end of the cable, so it'll pass through there. So what I'll do is I'll just show you how to do that next, and then I'll get cracking on and do the rest of those. Okay, so what I've got here is a little setup just to weld the bolt onto the cable, exactly the same way you would bolt the weld the studding on there. So in exactly the same way, you just hold a piece of studding in there like that and sort of weld it in. Now it's the old trick of using a bit of angle line. I've got some mole grips on the cable there, just holding it in place. Now the cable, under its own weight, will sit in the middle of the V to hold it in there. Obviously the bolt, take all the galvanising or any other tin plating off there. Now with this type of cable, there's only one real way to cut it cleanly, and that's with an angle grinder. Work out how long you need and then where you need to cut it. Don't try and use wire cutter or anything like that, because all of the pieces will splay out, and it makes a right mess. So when you cut it with an angle grinder, it does two things. One, it cuts a nice clean line, but secondly, as it's cutting it, it melts the metal slightly, and it makes the pieces of the threads, or whatever you call it, the pieces of wire, kind of fuse together a little bit. So it makes it sort of stay in one piece, if you like. So what I've got here is a very thin piece of aluminium. Any piece of aluminium will work. This is just these are actually the pieces of aluminium that came off the pieces of Allison fencing. Just a bit of scrap. Any will do. If you haven't got aluminium, wood will do, or anything like that. Wood's not quite as good. But what you don't want to do is have steel on here, because when you're welding this, if you're not careful, you'll weld it to the piece of angle iron underneath. So with there being aluminium there, what it'll do is the steel won't stick to it. It'll just basically stick to itself, which is the bolt and the cable. So that's why I do that. The only other thing that you could do if you haven't got any angle iron or aluminium is put the bolt into the vise, and then hold the cable in place with your hand, and then obviously with your other hand weld the cable. But it's much better like this, because it's all in alignment and your hands are nowhere near the weld, so it's got to be easier. So what you're going to do basically is weld the cable onto the bolt. What you want to do is, unlike when you're welding pieces together, you want these to be absolutely next to each other, so push that right up against the cable, and then you're going to weld in there nice and hot with the cable, with the welding wire on reasonably slow. So you want a reasonable amount of heat, and you want to sort of weld into that, and then as soon as you've done one, you can just rotate it around and weld it on the other side. So I'll do that now and show you what it looks like. Okay, so there's the finished article. As you can see, the weld's a little bit bulgy, but what we're going to do now is just note that it's welded actually onto the wire. That's the important thing. The weld nice and hot, and you've actually welded the cable strands. That's the important thing. Now all I'm going to do is get the angle grinder, starting on the bolt. I'm going to move up and down and basically just cut off the excess weld so it'll pass through the hole in there. So I'll just do that now, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. Okay, so after you've got the angle grinder to it, that's basically what it looks like. So that's where the cable is fused onto the or welded onto the bolt. Now, the best bit of advice I can give is when you're welding this type of cable onto here like this, what you want to do is you want to turn the gas up on your welder reasonably high, because what you don't want is any oxidation as the weld goes on. But basically what I can do now is, obviously I need to measure how long this cable needs to be, which is obviously the length of the what's the name, before I can cut the other end off to do the other end. But basically it's done exactly the same way, and obviously that will eventually pass through that piece of pipe like that, and then that will be the cable running along the top of the tunnel, holding the net in place. So what I'll do now is, as I said, I'll crack on and get the rest of these parts welded in, and then all being well, it's going to stop raining at some point, and I might be able to put it all up and show you what it looks like. Okay, so down to the final prep now. So basically all of your pipe work and everything, what you need to do is all of these sort of rough edges like that, what you need to do is just go over those with the angle grinder. Make sure that you've got no rough edges on the pipe work, because that will rub against your net or your plastic, whatever you're putting over, and that will obviously cause problems eventually. So what you need to do is with the angle grinder, like I've done here, is just go over all of the joints and just make sure that the surface is all nice and smooth, and there's no, you can have, the surface can be a little bit rough, obviously, because the paint will key to that a bit better anyway, but there can't be any sharp edges or any sort of protrusion. So you need to end up with everything looking kind of at least like that. Obviously anything that's sort of sticking out like that, I don't know if you can see that, well, there's a few pieces there that are sticking out, so obviously before I paint this piece, I'll sort of go over that and grind it, like here where the welds are. I'll just sort of sand that back. As soon as you've done that, and you've got it all nice and smooth like this, take any rust off at all. You don't want any rust on the metalwork at all. So I've gone over this again with the angle grinder, and I've just cleaned up all of the surfaces. And what I've done is I've just put a real quick coat of primer. If you're ever painting metal, always put a primer on, or an undercoat or something like that. And basically all I'm using here is sort of for wood and metal, and these aren't overly expensive, to be honest with you. And what I tend to do with the primer is I tend to put a little bit of turpentine in there, because you want it to be reasonably watery when you paint it on. As you can see, you're not looking for colour when you put the primer on. All you're doing is you're putting a very thin coat of paint onto the metalwork, just so that the top coat will key to it and stick to it, and that's basically what you're looking for. Now, with regard to the top coat, none of this paint cost me anything basically. All I've done, now this tin of paint, I don't know how long I've had it, but to give you an idea, the original tunnel that I made I think 6 or 7 years ago, and believe it or not, I used exactly the same tin of paint to do that. So all I keep doing is just adding bits of white and black to it to make grey basically. And all I do is put all the odds and ends of paint in there that I've got left over in the garage, and I just mix them all up, and basically it makes grey. Obviously if you put black and white together, it'll make grey. So as I say, I've not gone out and spent any money on paint. All I've done is just mixed up all the odds and ends out of the garage, and for the allotments that's going to be perfectly good. The important thing is the is the the framework's painted, so it's protected against the elements, and it won't look rusty, go rusty or anything like that. And obviously it looks nice. So all I've done, obviously, if you're ever mixing paint together, always mix the same type of paint together. I've got this is obviously it was originally white gloss, so all I'm doing is I'm mixing white and black gloss together, and I always make sure that the gloss is good for external use. So I know that it'll protect it against the elements. So all I'm going to do now is, now I've painted that with primer, it's had 24 hours, 48 hours, 2 days to dry. So all that I know is now nice and dry. Always give your paint more than enough time to dry, and this time of year you may need to leave it a little bit longer than you would in the summer. So obviously, with it being cold outside, I've left it a couple of days. Now what I can do is paint on the top coat. So I'll do that, and I'll let you have a look at it when it's finished. Okay, so that's the bottom side of it painted. Obviously I've left a little bit in the middle there unpainted, because I need to use that to turn it over, so I want to turn it over and do the other side now. But the one point I just wanted to make was, when you're painting anything like this, you only really want to put a thin coat. If you put paint on too thick, when it goes outside, when it's aged a little bit, what you'll find is the paint will crack and come off in lumps. Whereas if you paint it nice and thin, obviously you can go back and put a second coat on if you wish, but you're much better off putting a thin coat of paint and let that dry nice and hard. And if you want to go back, as I say, put a second coat on. But you're much better off with anything like this. Put a nice thin coat of paint on, and that'll last much longer. It'll stay stronger and stay on the metal for longer. And obviously, the important thing is make sure that you cover every single square inch of it, particularly when you get to the joints like here. What you want to do is make sure you've got the brush right in there, and everything's got a good coat of paint on it before you turn it around and do the other side. So just make sure you've got every single teeny bit nicely coated with paint. And then if there's nowhere for the water to get in, because obviously with the paint what you're doing is you're sealing it, so there's nowhere for water to get in and start it rusting. As soon as it starts to rust, the rust will go under the paintwork and work its way along. So it's always worthwhile giving it a good sort of good coat of paint and cover everything, every single teeny bit. That's why sometimes they recommend you go back and do a second coat. The reason for that, more than anything, is not to make the paint thicker, it's just to make sure that you've covered everything. So as I'll always, if I'm painting something grey, I'll always use a white primer, so I know that that I've covered everything. If I'm painting something white, I'll use a grey primer, so I can tell where I've painted and where I've not. So that's a good tip. So I'll just turn the thing over now. Obviously I was in this bit that I haven't painted. Turn it over 180 degrees, and then I'll sort of paint all the rest of it. But the other point I wanted to make is, obviously you only need 3 points of contact. So as you can see, I've propped it up at that end so I can get underneath with the brush, and I've just put a little pot of paint under this side here. So there's only 1, 2, 3 points of contact. All the rest of it's just up in the air, and that's enough to get underneath and paint as much as I can first time round. So that's that side done. As I say, I'll turn it over, paint the other side, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so that's the final paint on there. So that's both sides painted, and all I've done is basically painted it that way and then turned it round. Ended up with it face up like this. Now what I will do is, when the frame goes together at the allotment, what I will do is take the paint up with me, and if there's any marks that I see on there, before I put the net on, I'll just quickly put a little bit of paint on, just to make sure it's all nicely sealed, just to protect it. But that's all I'm going to do from a paint point of view. So I'll just leave that in here for 24 hours just to dry off, and then obviously it's going to take probably about another day or so to absolutely 100% cure in this weather. But what I'll do is, to make room in here, I'll give it tonight, let that dry, and then tomorrow morning I'll take this outside and leave it outside, because as soon as the surface has dried off, obviously if it does rain, it's all protected now anyway. so that'll be protected, you know, in the elements now. So I'll bob that outside and let that dry off whilst I'm painting the other parts. Okay, so the first frame's now dry. I've just got the poles in the middle, so I'll just ignore them for a minute. But as you can see, you know, you can touch, you know, doing a nice thin coat as well. It also dries that much quicker. So that's basically 24 hours on. Now what I'll do now is just take this outside. Now I know that it's protected, and I shall put that up so I can make some room in here. Now I've also primed these are the two central poles. The point I wanted to make is obviously all of this pipe is galvanised, so really the bits that I need to focus on obviously are the bits that are sort of were bare metal, if you like. So obviously the end brackets where any of the pipes are joined, and obviously there's you can't really tell now, but there was a join there. You can just about see the witness mark going around. So you know, obviously that's the bit where you need to, you know, most certainly focus. Anywhere where you've welded, these sort of strengthening pipes here, they're all stainless steel, so they're not going to rust anyway. So you know, just painting them is just you know, just for completeness really. But where you need to focus your attention is obviously where there's any bare metal. So obviously these brackets at the end were welded, and also, you know, they were. So what I actually did was give those a couple of coats of primer. And I'll make sure that they're properly coated. So that's the two central bars in the end part. So the end part will go outside now, giving me room to paint all the others later on. This is the first completed hoop. As you can see, this is where the cables are going to go through. So there's one there. There's one at the top there. If you can see that, okay. So that's all been sort of nicely sort of sanded down. Any of the joints have been sort of sanded down, so they're all you know, so there's no sort of sharp edges where the net can catch. And I'm just using these where the cables are going. I've just tied that up with a bit of welding wire up to the roof, so that's actually suspended, so I can you know, actually get to all of the areas. Now these were already painted and they're galvanised anyway, so really all I was doing was you know, just basically putting a base of primer on there so I can put the top coat. So but that's all ready to go, so they're all dry now, so I can put the top grey coat on that and these two, and because the weather's reasonable today, I should be able to do that outside. Okay, so I've painted the two side sections. Now I've been doing this sort of in the afternoon, so unfortunately this one's got like a bit of a dull sheen to it on the top here, which was the last bit I painted. Now that's probably because we had a bit of a frost, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure it'll protect the metal nevertheless. So there are a few little bits, as you can see the white coming through here, that I need to touch up. But what I'll do is I'll put the framework back together now, put it up with all the pieces that I've painted so far, and then I'll show you what it looks like. But obviously what I did was painted the side facing this way, and then again sort of turned it upside down and then painted the other side to make sure that I captured every little bit. But the metalwork is galvanised or stainless steel anyway, so really the only bits that I need to focus on are the sort of the parts that have been welded, or where the parts have been joined together and welded. So, but that's basically the framework. So what I'll do now is I'll put it all back together. Now it's all painted, and I can go around and just check any bits that have been missed. I can just quickly touch them up with a bit of paint. Okay, so now the frame is back in place. Just one quick point to make. Obviously now you've got it painted, what you want to do is protect it as much as you can, so I'm just putting little bits of wood under there just to protect the paint from being scratched by the bricks. And I was really careful painting this, but I can still see little bits. You can see that there are bits that I've missed. So obviously now I've got it all up, I've obviously painted the majority of it. But what I'll do is I'll go around with the paint whilst I'm doing the other bit, and just touch up these little bits that haven't been quite had a full coat, but there are little bits here and there I've noticed. So I'll just go around and just touch those up. There's a little bit there that's not been coated. So, but basically that's all painted now. So what I need to do is finish off the middle hoop and the end hoop, get them back on, and then I'll be able to put all the cables on. So I'll show you that next. So for the end section, I've welded in a bar across there, as I explained I would. Now that's basically going to be the top of the door. So that's all welded in at both ends. So what I can do now is actually take this off and sort of get it ready for paint. The only thing I need to do is to put some more strengthening bits across there and across here, which won't take very long, and then I can get that painted. So because that's a really good strong weld at the end, what I can do is actually take this off and I can put them strengthening bits on after it's removed from the frame, because I know it's all square. So basically what's to do on here is to weld those in, and then basically what I'm going to do, because this part's not galvanised, obviously this is bare steel, this is the bit that really needs to be painted correctly. So what I'm going to do is basically sand all of this down, fetch all the paint off, grind it all the way down to bare metal, and then I'm going to give it a really good coat of primer, let that dry properly. Then I'm going to give it a second coat of primer, so that's all most certainly, you know, sort of watertight if you like. And then I'm going to give this, the door frame part, you know, 2 good coats of gloss. The one thing that I do need to do is I'm going to drill a series of holes up here with a 6mm drill, because basically the net's going to come along here, wrap around, and then I need some way to tie the net on here. So I'm going to be drilling some holes up there. I've decided not to put another strengthening bar across here. There's no real need to do that, and I don't want to sort of over-engineer that. It's already sort of heavy enough at this end. Obviously weight's quite important, because if the wind gets under this, it's going to lift it. So you know, you want a reasonable amount of weight in there. Obviously the corner's going to be tied down to the ground anyway with a stake, but you know, it's always good to have you know, a reasonable amount of weight in these things. So you know, not too heavy that you can't move them, but heavy enough so you know the wind won't catch them. So as soon as I've done that, all I need to do obviously is tidy up this post again. Most of it's already tidy, to be honest with you. So this one's ready to go, so I can paint this hoop as well. Obviously I need to put in the cable bit. Now these side pieces here, I've already started to paint this down here with a bit of primer. So I've got a piece where I could sort of lift it up. But what I'm going to do is put these pieces on the side, because I think that's going to be the easiest way to paint them. So I'll paint one side, turn it over, then paint the other side. So they're all sanded down, ready to go. And what I'm going to do is paint them actually on the lawn. They're too big. They're, you know, obviously the 24 foot long these are, so I'm not going to get those into the shed. So I need to basically do these when the weather's good. So I was going to take them down, do them on the grass. The reason I'm doing them on the grass is obviously if any drops of paint go on the floor, it's just going to go on the grass. Next time I cut the grass, it's going to take all that away. Obviously not going to paint it on top of the patio, because that'll potentially damage the patio. So because I know it's all square and everything, what I can actually do is take all this apart now, you know, just to finish it all off. So I'll be dismantling this now, ready for paint. I've obviously got to cut off the bolts at the bottom there and finish that welding up. So these 2 bolts here need to be chopped off and then welded underneath, sanded back. So I'll do that obviously before I paint it. Just give it one last check out to make sure there's no sharp edges or any burrs anywhere that's going to catch the net, and then I can paint them in exactly the same way. So because these are galvanised, these are just going to have 1 coat of primer. Obviously where I've welded it, I may potentially put a couple of coats on there, and then the whole thing will be glossed with the grey in exactly the same way. Obviously anywhere where it's going rusty, you can see where the galvanising's come through. I'm just going to give that a really good coat of primer. I'm not going to sand it back, I'm just going to prime that and then paint it with the gloss. Now obviously this top piece here is going to be up in the air, so that's not going to see much sort of grief than, you know, a bit of rain every so often. But the bottom one, obviously that's going to be pretty much sitting on the ground, if not under the ground. So I most certainly need to make sure this bottom section here and these little feet have got a really good coat of paint, so that they don't you know, sort of rot away under the ground. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll show you in stages as I'm getting on as I go through. So I hope this episode has been of some use to you. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or questions you've got below, and I'll always get back to you. And I'll see you on the next episode of Jim's Garden.